Welcome to Music Mania. I'm your host, King Crusoe. You can call me KC, and today I'm foolishly wearing a green shirt in front of a green screen, so that's why part of the edges of this look a little bit goofy. It's because of what's trying to be keyed out, even though this is a very different shade of green from the green screen. But in either case, today we are doing our regular monthly Music Mania episode, where I'll be talking about all of the new releases that I checked out in February, and then ranking them all at the end, showing you where I would place them in the list. So let's just go ahead and get started. Actually not covering a February release, we'll cover the one January release that I did not listen to or did not know about before actually doing the last one of these videos. So let's switch on over to whichever one it is. This one over here, Retcon by Red Vox. If you happen to follow Smitty on this platform, not the booktuber Smitty, but the gamer Smitty, you probably know about when he played The New Flesh on Steam. It happens to be free if you want to go check out that game. The New Flesh happens to basically be like a visual, like interactive music video of sorts for this entire album. It's an interactive experience where you can like experience and collect like all the different tracks from this album, plus some other collectible stuff related to the band. It was kind of a cool experience to watch that video and then go experience the full thing for myself. And as such, I listened to the full album, and sometimes you just kind of forget what it's like to witness an artist capture, as I say at the beginning of the review that I'm showing here, the raw quality of the human condition in their work. There's something about the way that this indie rock sound specifically comes together, and quite frankly, the way that the lyrics come together in a lot of places that feels so authentic and personal in ways that I just don't really experience that much anymore. You know, things can be real, things can be relatable, things can be authentic to the human experience, but this definitely struck a chord in a way that I really didn't expect it to. Even though I'm not much of an indie rock person, I don't listen to very much of it. And even though there are plenty of moments on this album that frankly should kind of annoy me, that should be things that I just don't really enjoy very much, there is a lot of stuff here that like managed to break through that barrier and be impactful and be enjoyable anyway. So I recommend listening to Retcon. That's why I definitely wanted to give this a shout. It was a January release technically, and in accordance with it being a January release, it did end up in my January album and EP list. I was able to include a couple albums that weren't working at the time when I originally composed the list, but Retcon ends up in number 4 of my January ranking, so that's good for you guys to know. All of that said, this is not a video about January's music releases, so let's switch over to February. The first new album that came out in February that I got the chance to listen to was Immoral and Malevolent Happenings, the brand new album by Before I Turn. Speaking a little bit more about Before I Turn, there will be a video on this channel in a couple of weeks that will actually be doing an entire discography ranking of Before I Turn, and you know, that's why this review is titled First Time. I highly recommend, because I did a second review on the platform here related to that discography deep dive there. So Immoral and Malevolent Happenings is fantastic. There are aspects of the production that I don't fully love. Oh, also I should point out I did review the album and the book technically a couple of weeks ago on this channel as well, so if you want to know more about this specifically, you should check out that video. But my general consensus is that despite a couple aspects of the production not being what I personally wanted to hear as far as soundscape, the meatiness of the guitars, that kind of thing, Immoral and Malevolent Happenings is a really great album from a songwriting perspective. It has some really great choruses. It also flips the entire story of the Arthur Rose saga of Claustrophobic and Lovelorn, just in ways that honestly you don't even really expect. They also add new context to those albums, again, in ways that were just totally unexpected, made me rethink the entirety of the story. Both the album and the book were able to do that, but the album is really good. If you like Before I Turn, you're going to like this. I think of this album as a pretty solid combination of The Devil Exists and the storyline of the Arthur Rose saga. And it's really good. If you like all of that and you also like the musical Sweeney Todd, you will find a lot to enjoy in this record. It was really solid. Next up, I did listen to Reconstruction Second Story by Lecrae. Lecrae released an album last year called Reconstruction, and it was solid. I enjoyed it a good bit. There were a handful of tracks that I didn't really like, but I was surprised to find this year that he released a follow-up to Reconstruction's second story. This album, technically on streaming platforms, includes the extra tracks. I think it's like 7 of them, and then the original album, but I choose to think of this kind of like Rehab the Overdose was, like a decade and a half ago, where it's more like a follow-up EP that works in conjunction with the previous album. And reviewing this as that EP, it's, again, pretty solid. I like Lecrae, I like the style, and I think it's solid enough to listen to. I think that if you happen to be Christian and you happen to be struggling with things related to your personal faith and stuff like that, the album in general, Reconstruction plus Second Story, happened to make a pretty good story for that kind of person. I think there's a lot to really appreciate about what's on offer here, and so I recommend it if you like rap and if you like Christian themes, obviously, in your music. But yeah, I thought that this was solid. Next up, I listened to Oblivion by Summon the Goddess. I don't remember how Summon the Goddess ended up on my radar, but I thought this EP was pretty solid. I think that if you enjoy a simpler version of metalcore, something that is akin to the 2000s style of metalcore, but a little bit less riffy, a little bit less of that particular riff style, but more just a simpler version of song structure and stuff like that, this is a pretty solid example of what that can be. If you want to listen to the EP, or if you want to listen to like the best song on it, I think you should check out 1996. I think that song is really great. The rest of it is just kind of okay. It doesn't wear out its welcome. It's not bad. If you got quick 25 minutes to spare for something like this, it's good, but I do think that 1996 is worth checking out and seeing if that is something that is to your tastes, because I thought the song was pretty solid. Next up was an album whose cover is not appearing properly on Music Board, Burn This World. The Browning released an evolved version of the album. I'm not entirely sure how deep the evolved version actually goes, like whether they rewrote and re-recorded stuff, or if it's just a form of remix or remaster or something like that. The weird thing about Burn This World Evolved is that it doesn't sound much different than my memory of the original album was. I did not listen to them back to back to compare or anything like that. But I do think that the album doesn't sound as good as the evolved version of an album should, but when the original album is as good as the Brownings albums tend to be most of the time, it's generally forgivable. Plus, having a little bit of a bonus track is fine, but I'm not 100% sure how much better this sounds compared to the original version, just off the top of my head. It's not super obvious just listening to the evolved version, like, oh yeah, this sounds like a much bigger version of it. I don't know, I don't remember well enough, but I enjoy the album enough for what it is, so I enjoy the album, but I can't really speak to how it compares to the original. I just really like the Browning, and I forgot how much I like Burn This World, even though it's one of their weaker albums, in memory anyway, so yeah. Next up is what is probably going to be a hot take. I've never listened to Converge before. I know that they have a big fan base. Well, maybe not big fan base is the right way to put it. I know that they have made a pretty big stamp in the general scene with regard to the type of music that they create, and the people that enjoy that tend to really enjoy that. But this is my first time listening to Converge, and I just wasn't really into this album, actually. I think that's more of a personal taste thing. What they're doing just fine, but I wasn't really into the vocals, and a lot of the songwriting tendencies are just, this isn't something that I personally really want to listen to. So I do rate it low. It's not really my thing, but it's again, mostly on account of me rather than anything else. So yeah, it's maybe that's going to be a hot take, but yeah, I just wasn't into this, but I think that's a me issue and not necessarily a Converge issue. If you're a fan of Converge, you'll probably like this, I think. That seems to be the consensus. Let me go to the album. Yeah, it's a pretty solid average rating. Like, I am one of the only 2 stars, and those are some of the lowest ratings of the record here. So it seems to be a pretty solid release amongst fans, but it might just be that I'm not a fan of Converge. After this one album, I'm not particularly inclined to check anything else out, to be honest with you. Next up will be Story Untold's album Generation 404, which took about 404 generations to actually release, because these guys have spent all but like 5 years or something doing nothing besides just releasing singles constantly, which, you know, as far as algorithms and streaming platforms and stuff, makes sense. I don't fault them for that from a business perspective, but as far as like what I tend to listen to, I might listen to a couple of singles that a band puts out, but I don't tend to listen to that many. And so far this year, the last handful of months, I've basically stopped listening to singles entirely for the most part, outside of a few very rare exceptions. I only listen to full EP and album releases for the most part anymore. And this album took way too long to come out, and I also think it's just kind of fine. You know, I think that Black Sheep is a great song, actually, but outside of that song, there's not really much to comment about here. You know, it's not generic pop punk in the way that a lot of pop punk can be. And so, like, anybody who wants something that's sort of still within that realm of music, but is definitely doing something different with it, should check this out. But, like, I don't think that a lot of those ideas or a lot of those differences really mean very much or make much difference. Part of why I love pop punk is because of the way it sounds. So even if something is generic there, I just tend to like it anyway. So Generation 404 just wasn't really my thing outside of that one song. So yeah, that's how I feel. Definitely the band's last full-length album, which was like back in 2019 or something like that, 2018 even, Waves being their only other full album release. Yeah, much better album, and definitely much more of what I would be expecting from a pop punk artist. Like I said, it's cool that Generation 404 does something very different, but it doesn't fully do that successfully, in my opinion. Next up is going to be a really, really great album. That is, I Guess It Was Nowhere by Above Below, which I do give 5 stars, even though I don't think I actually have this rated or ranked in my top spot when we come to the end of this video. But in either case, if you are into progressive elements in other forms of metal, you should be listening to this, and especially if you're into progressive metalcore, because I'm somebody who thinks that using that tag, progressive metalcore, seems to be like generally kind of arbitrary a lot of the time. Most progressive metalcore, or so-called progressive metalcore, is just metalcore with like maybe a track or two that kind of, you can see that progressive influence in it, but for the most part it's like just kind of the same thing, but basically it's not different enough for me to personally feel like giving it a different label most of the time. This album, however, is like, no, if there's a reason why it should be its own thing, why it does have its own label, this is the reason why, and it is incredible for it. It genuinely just works so well as a full, complete album listening experience. One of those things about it's not even about concept albums. I don't even know if this is a concept album, but one of my favorite things about a lot of prog metal specifically is that prog artists very often tend to do pretty heavy storytelling within their music, whether that be between individual tracks or over the course of full albums or whatever, or just the way that they apply dynamics and different musical motifs throughout an album, whether or not it is a concept album, is one of the things that makes prog so interesting. And this album was one of the ways that this actually worked in a metalcore context, where like, I don't think there's very many songs, if any, on this album that are going to be that great on an individual basis, on their own merits, which might sound like a little bit of a slanderous thing to say, maybe, but I think it's kind of true, because this album worked so well because of it being a full album. The songs flow so well that there were times where I didn't even realize that the song actually changed. There are a couple points where there's a pretty hard cutoff, where it's pretty obvious, like, okay, there's a song split there, and I think that generally that works because there's like a few different acts of the album, so to speak, from a sonic perspective, and you can tell where those splits are pretty easily. But from an individual track-by-track basis, you're just going along for the ride with this album, and I definitely recommend experiencing it that way. Like I said, it just happens to be like maybe the best example of progressive metalcore that I've personally ever listened to, and I can't wait to listen to this album several more times because it was just so solid. I really, really liked this. I'm glad that Above Below didn't just disappear into the ether, because I think that The Sowers of Discord is a pretty solid EP. I also remember liking the Lotus chapters, but then they just kind of disappeared. They released that single, that double single, Melting, Amber, and Reprise, a handful of years ago as well, that I thought was going to be like a double single leading into something bigger, but then nothing really happened. I didn't even remember Scorpion ever coming out. I don't remember this song at all. But then they've been silent for years, basically. I guess they did release a single late last year that indicated that they were still alive, and then they had that single that released just a couple of weeks before the album did. But yeah, this record is really, really solid. If you like progressive metalcore, you should not be skipping this at all. Just do yourself the favor and listen to it. Next up is going to be a big surprise hit for me, actually. That is The New Flesh by Sylosis. Now, I have a complicated relationship with Sylosis, and that is because when they performed with Trivium back during COVID times for that, digital live show, A Light or a Distant Mirror, I thought that they had a pretty solid performance. I enjoyed listening to that performance. I never bothered or made time to actually listen to any of their music that they had released up to that point, which was probably a mistake, but all their music that they released since then, namely A Sign of Things to Come and the EP The Path, well, I didn't like them very much. I didn't even finish listening to A Sign of Things to Come, and The Path was not enjoyable to me at all. It notably was just, I just didn't enjoy it, like, at all. So I kind of went into The New Flesh having not listened to any singles, not wanting preconceived notions. I just went into it being like, we'll see what this album does. If I still don't like it, I'll just accept that Sylosis isn't for me, even though I enjoyed them in that somewhat technically live context. But no, this album was really, really good, actually. It was I don't know what about it was so different that made it actually work, but I really liked it. I thought that the riffs were really great. All of the unclean vocals were super solid. The drumming actually stood out to me in really memorable ways this time. I don't know what it is. I have a lot of standout tracks down here for reasons I can't explain. I just thought that The New Flesh actually came together and was something that I genuinely was able to enjoy, whereas their last couple releases I didn't like at all. So it's a case of being really surprised by how much I liked this because of my past experience with the band, but I really liked this album. Next up is going to be the EP Dawn of the Iconoclast by Worm Shepherd, which I think is just fine. There's basically nothing to say about it other than if you like that sort of blackened deathcore approach that Lorna Shore does, this is more of that, but I don't think that it stands out in any way, shape, or form from the crowd. It's good for what it is, but it's not memorable and doesn't do anything very interesting. So if you want something new and interesting, this isn't it. But it is also kind of funny that this is the closest that I've come to actually liking Worm Shepherd. I've listened to their last couple of albums when those came out and didn't enjoy either of them, and I actually kind of liked this EP, maybe because I like that blackened sound, but because it's not doing anything really innovative this time around, it's just kind of the same thing still. It doesn't really stand out, so it's fine. It's totally fine. This rating should probably be more like 3 out of 5 instead of 3.5 out of 5, but it's fine. It's not offensive. It's not bad. It's not disappointing. It's just kind of exists, basically. This is a release that I will forget about in approximately 2.5 seconds after I close this window. But next up is going to be an EP by Nowhere Left, a band that I've sort of loosely followed for a handful of years. I don't think I've ever checked out their 2024 album when that came out, which maybe I should have, but they're kind of like a modern alt metal type of thing where it's not as heavy as alt metal can sometimes be in terms of riffs or anything like that. It is very clean, vocal heavy. There's not a whole ton of really super interesting ideas going on here. It's just solid, modern, hard rock / heavy metal music, and that's about it. I don't think that this is necessarily something that people need to go out of their way to check out. In fact, I don't think it is. But I do think that if you're willing to give it a shot, that the first song, Violet, was actually really solid. I think that if the entire EP was of the quality that Violet was, that this EP would actually be one that would like stick in my top favorite EPs of the year through the entire year. But because it's only really that first song that does that, and the rest are notably not as exciting, you know, it's not anything that you need to check out, but it's fine. Let me edit this review because I accidentally left the rating in the title. Anyway, yeah, that is how I feel about that. But that actually means that we are done with talking about what I listened to. This is my ranking of what I listened to. Let me note that I did actually listen to entry number 10 there. This is actually, I need to actually move ranking number 10 to put it, you know, where it needs to be in this case. Okay, just spam comment. You gotta love that. Yeah, this is my ranking for what came out in February. I guess it was nowhere by above below by ratings, you know, like the 5 out of 5, 4.5 out of 5 kind of thing should probably be my number one. But I fell into love again with Before I Turn and became obsessed with Before I Turn doing this recent discography ranking. Sorry, just all my vowels getting mixed up in my brain. That means that Immoral Malevolent Happenings just kind of sticks out to me a little bit more from that point of view. I have had the chance to listen to it multiple times, whereas I haven't yet for the new Above Below album. And there's also the fact that I am biased with Before I Turn. I know those guys. I'm friends with Alex. I edited the book version of Immoral and Malevolent Happenings, so like there is bias there as well. But these two are definitely the best releases of the month for me. Silosis was a very surprising hit that I just really enjoyed. I think that Burn This World is solid and a solid reminder that I should listen to the Browning more, because I really genuinely like them. They're so good and enjoyable for that simple EDM core stuff that they're doing with those early couple of albums. And I think that Reconstruction Second Story is a solid follow-up EP sort of addition to Reconstruction. And then the other 5 albums are just, or releases here are just, you know, they are what they are. They're solid. Nothing super special beyond like a song maybe that really sticks out. And then, like I said, I didn't really like the Converge album very much, which I think is a me problem. But yeah, that is going to be the end of this video. That is the end of my ranking February's albums. Actually, before we go off, let me go ahead and fix things up a little bit for showing you what my current album of the year list looks like at this point. There's not much to talk about on the EP side of things here, but it is funny to note that both of the EPs that I think are worth noting for 2026 so far, at least as far as my list goes, it's Christian stuff, you know, themes of struggling with personal things and that general palette of trying to come through that, trying to overcome that, something that I've been relating to a good bit. Maybe that's why these EPs are there, even though they're not super highly rated, but this is the standouts for me so far. And then my album of the year so far in 2026 is also looking a bit like this. Actually, I'm going to go ahead and fix this because Above Below should definitely be above Entrance into Eternity. And there's also a pretty good chance that Above Below ends up above of Sulfur and or Before I Turn. I already talked about the interaction between Before I Turn and Above Below. Of Sulfur, this is another album that I only rated 4.5 out of 5. There's a couple tracks on there that I don't think are as solid as the rest, but I think that the rest of it is so dang good that I just can't not love it. And there's also a couple songs on there that really hit for me on a personal level. But yeah, this is currently what I have in my album of the year list. This is obviously going to change. Orders are going to change. Some of these things are going to be kicked off over time as new albums continue to be added to the list. But for now, this is what things look like. What are some of your favorite albums of the year so far? I would be interested to hear about all of that. But like I said, thank you for watching before. I'm going to thank you for watching again. There will be just a few weeks at this point before the next one of these episodes comes out on account of the last the last Friday of the month, the last release day of March being on the 27th, so the next Music Mania episode will actually come out on the 30th of March instead of early in April, so, you know, just a few weeks away. And then, like I mentioned before, if you want to see my discography ranking for Before I Turn and just the experience that I happened to have with that, which was a wonderful experience for me personally, that will be coming out in 2 weeks on the 16th. But yeah, I'm going to get out of your hair now. This video was longer than I intended for it to be, which seems to happen a lot. But yeah, thank you one final time for watching. For now, I have been your host, King Crusoe. You can call me KC, and I hope to see you guys in the next video.